Hello and welcome to Good Morning Vibrations, a format of the new digital TV channel of the German-speaking issue of Forbes. My name is Andrea Gläsermann, I'm senior editor, and I'm happy to start the day with you. Under the theme, The Morning Makes the Day, Diversity Makes a Difference, in this format I meet a lot of different personalities, talk with them about their career, what makes them successful, and what can we learn from them. Today, it's absolutely a pleasure and I'm really happy to welcome Sabinna Rachimova as my guest today. She's a fashion designer based in London and her label is called Sabinna. And there she creates sustainable and ethical fashion for women. And if you think innovation and tradition can't be combined, you've never talked with Sabinna because she does it every day. And we will talk about it later. And Sabinna is also an under 30 list maker and a lecturer at the University of Arts, where she teaches the course Fashion Entrepreneurship and Innovation. So Sabinna, it's so good to have you here today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure for me as well.
So before we start, I would like to mention that everyone who is watching right now can ask a question at any time during the session, and we will have the chance to discuss them afterwards. So Sabinna, in this session, I always ask my guests if they have a certain morning routine, because there's the common opinion that successful people have one. So I would like to ask you if you have a morning routine.
Well, I think I have good and bad habits. I have good morning habits and bad morning habits. The good ones are I always have breakfast, and I think that makes a huge difference. This is kind of like my time to go through the day, to kind of, prepare my mindset for what's to come, and obviously fuel my brain with all the nutrition that I need. My worst habit in the morning is that the first thing I do when I wake up, I reach out for my phone and I start checking my emails before I leave my bed. And I really try to get rid of that habit. I'm really working on it, but it's difficult. So yeah, I think probably a balance between good and bad habits is what makes a morning routine.
Okay. And before we deep dive into our topics, I would like to know, how's the current situation in London and how do you deal with the corona crisis?
It's been weird. It feels long. I mean, it's been long, but it feels longer, and we are still in lockdown here. So I know in Austria, obviously, you have kind of some new regulations that came in, and it's coming slightly back to normal, to a new normal. We are still working from home. It's been tricky and challenging, I think, especially talking from a creative industry perspective that I'm working in. There were a lot of changes that needed to be adapted really fast. So you needed to react as fast as you can, which is exhausting because you need to make a lot of really important decisions day in, day out. So yeah, the situation here is still uncertain. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Have you ever thought about, I mean, like, I'm not sure if my label is going to survive this whole crisis?
I think this thought comes every day, which is probably normal because this is where the whole survival act kicks in, because you need to know that a crisis is happening in order to react to it. The very first week was still the hardest because we needed to make sure that everyone's safe. We've sent everyone home earlier as well. So before the official lockdown started, we started to take some measures and work from home. Obviously, transparent communication is key as well. So I made sure to ring up all the factories we work with, everyone who's a freelancer on the team or is part-time or full-time, doesn't matter, whoever we usually work with. We had a very transparent and direct communication with all of them, saying, how does this situation look for you? Trying not to cancel any order, trying not to cancel any contracts, and especially with freelancers, not to cancel any of their work. First week was the hardest. And for quite a few days, I was slightly paralyzed, I think, in terms of what am I going to do now? But in retrospective, I can say that we've done really well. and that's also an important thing, to really sit down and say, okay, the first reaction was right, you've done well, what's next? So kind of taking it one day at a time and trying to stay as positive as possible and not get this kind of thoughts of, will I survive? Will this business survive at the end?
So let's talk more about fashion. I mean, you're pretty successful. You won several awards and you're at the London Fashion Week. But as far as I know, your start was not that successful. In fact, you got rejected. So what's your secret to success, and how hard is the fashion industry in general?
Secret to success is always a difficult one because there's always this question, how do you define success? What makes you successful? I mean, obviously, I'm really honored all these things that you mentioned to had the chance to win awards and work with the best people you could imagine and just being on this journey. But having said that, I think success is not having all these things on your list. Success is probably being able to do what you really love. And that's the reason I got into fashion. And as you mentioned, yes, the beginning wasn't really easy. Also, I guess because I had a very naive approach towards fashion. So my background is I learned handcraft from my grandmother. I learned how to crochet and sew and knit and all these things. I never knew fashion as an industry. I never knew it's a whole business. And even growing up, I didn't know you can study fashion design. So that all came later on. And I had all sorts of jobs as a teenager, never really understanding up until the moment when I ended up working in this industry, what this or how massive and big this industry is. So I guess there is no secret to success. It's a very individual journey. And you just, again, have to make sure that you identify your strength and then just keep going. And rejections are just part of it. I guess you can only win or learn. So I don't really believe in like failure or things not working out. You know, it's probably something that will then identify itself later on in the future.
And I also mentioned that you're a lecturer of the course and fashion entrepreneurship and innovation. And I would like to know, how does being innovative in your daily work life look like, and how innovative is the fashion industry?
That's a tricky one. What am I gonna say so I don't overstep some of the rules here. So fashion can be very innovative in some parts, but again, looking at this moment that we have now, looking at the situation we ended up being with the crisis, with the Corona crisis, I guess the fashion industry still ignores a lot of technology tools, a lot of opportunities. Once things are done in a certain way, people really try to stick to it. There's a lot of heritage, there's a lot of tradition happening, and just kind of probably being comfortable with things that used to work for a very long time. So that I find the fashion industry overall could change and be better. Innovation means for me to be flexible, to be able to adapt to certain situations, whatever comes up, and that can change every day. You are able to react to it. You're able to have a mindset that can then react with change and ideas. And the most important thing is to actually take them to action. I see a lot of people talking about things that they would love to do or they could do them. Before you try them, you don't know if something will work out, and that will stop innovation, of course.
Are there some innovative projects you're doing during this whole crisis?
Probably, again, a question of definition. Where does innovation start and stop, and what people will define as innovation? I would say yes. Again, the fact that we were able to adapt our business in such a short period of time, that we were able, because we don't only offer products, we also offer experiences. So we were able to move all our offline experiences to online spaces in a very short period of time. We were able to react to the demand of what the customer needs at the moment, to change our whole content on social media, on newsletter, how we talk to the customers. So I would say that on its own is innovation that happened within the business. You started to create a new field within your existing business. So I would say, yes, there are a couple of things we're working on at the moment. And even simple things. We started to sell and sew masks. We've never done that before. This is new for us as well. So that's somewhere where we had to be innovative and try to make sure that we figure out how to do that.
And now you're not only innovative, but also you rely on tradition, as you mentioned before. And I would like to know, why did you decide to do so?
I guess probably a natural approach as well. As I mentioned before, I didn't grow up in a family that works in the creative industry. I didn't know anyone who works in this field or could show me or be an example as a story of how to do things. So my approach is very traditional. I just really liked handcraft. That's what I really cared about. I was fascinated how you can create three-dimensional things out of two-dimensional. It was just magical. So this approach kind of kept this whole tradition in me, I would say, and the love for handcraft and the maker and manufacturing side in general. But growing up in the 90s in Europe, having all these possibilities and opportunities, I guess it wasn't possible not to be into innovation as well. And of course, I have to mention my partner, David, as well, who works in tech. So he's a big influence on that side as well. So I guess this is why I always thought it would be nice to build a bridge between tradition and innovation and just show that a lot of the handcraft we forgot about or we don't use anymore these days can be really modern, can be really wearable, and can really exist in the modern days and be as beautiful as never before.
So you said at the beginning you had no idea how to start a business or how the fashion industry works. So how was the start? How did you start in the whole thing?
Trial and error, lots of it. Starting a business without a business background is not the smartest decision you can make. But again, I guess the vision was there and I felt like there was a gap in the market. Back then when we started 5 years ago, sustainability still wasn't as strong as a topic as it is now. So I'm sorry, I do feel that it was the right time to do so. And again, it was about trying things out and maybe be a bit too fierce. I don't know, in retrospective, I'm amazed myself because I was never a confident teenager or a confident child, doubting myself wherever I could. It took me years to build self-confidence. And as you mentioned before, I was rejected from university when I first applied to go down the fashion route. So that wasn't helpful either. I don't know, it was just trying and knocking on as many doors as you can, trying to talk to people, build your network. That's a crucial one, because if you don't come from this background in this industry, you don't know anyone. If you keep moving to new countries like I did, you have to start all over again. Just be open. Don't be scared to ask for advice. Don't be scared to ask for help. This is not a one-woman show. This can only be done with people around you. And I guess this was the reason as well that I managed to push through the first very hard years where I had to educate myself a lot and just learn through a lot of errors of how you actually have to run a business and how it works.
So having a look at the time, I think I have a look at the questions from the audience. So let me check on that. I think there are a few questions. Can you be in the fashion business but still be involved in politics?
Ooh, politics should be way more involved in fashion. So yeah, for sure. I think we need regulations. We need people who know the fashion industry and know politics. So yeah, fashion is political, always was and should be.
That's a good sentence. Well, so, and the next one, how do you stay motivated, especially after being rejected?
Well, first, you're not motivated at all. I had the worst year, probably, or one of the worst years I've ever experienced on a personal and mental health level, I would say. It's never nice to be rejected. And I didn't know that this was just the first of many, 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 many rejections to follow. So this is one that I talk a lot about because it's university and it's a big one. It's a big milestone that then led for me to move to a different country. But there were other rejections that came along the way, not getting sponsorships or funding or projects being rejected, Brexit happening and things changing. So there were a lot of milestones that weren't very nice. I guess to probably think back of what your purpose and what your values are were quite helpful. So whenever there's something that doesn't work out, I sit down and I ask myself, how important was it that it happens? Maybe it's for the good. And most importantly, why am I doing what I'm doing? Yes, it's nice that if things work out, but I'm also doing it for personal growth, to learn something, and most importantly, to be true to myself and be able to live my values and my purpose every day. And that's very helpful, just to center yourself. But again, there's nothing wrong of feeling really bad for a long time and really giving yourself into these emotions and feelings that you have when being rejected. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to ask you one last question. Where do you find your ideas for innovative projects and how to stay innovative?
Ooh, that's a good one. To stay innovative, I think you have to stay informed and up to date. So you need to know what's happening out there. That's a very common question people ask us, being like, so you're a sustainable brand, how sustainable are you? Or how do you make sure you are sustainable? I always answer, it's not about being sustainable now, it's also about staying sustainable and always adding new parts to it. Life changes, the world changes, so many new innovation and material research, for example, in our field comes in. You need to stay up to date in order to stay innovative and keep introducing new things to your business, to your life. So that's an important one. What was the second part of the question?
The first part.
Oh, the first part.
Where do you find your innovative ideas?
I guess I was always inspired by other people. So whenever someone tells me a story or a pain point they have or something that they would love to see, my brain starts to work and I start to connect dots and I think, oh, maybe we are the ones who could deliver that or bring that to life. And we have this very small team, I have to say, but our projects are always very, very ambitious. So probably combining the stories of other people that I hear and then dreaming a little bit too big is what makes our project so special.
So thanks, Sabinna, for sharing your insights and for having you here and for taking the time today. It was absolutely a pleasure having you here. And I hope you guys out there enjoyed it as much as I did. And I hope we will join again tomorrow at 9:30. My next guest will be Bernhard Keres, and Bernhard Keres is the first opera singer to become a C-level executive of multi-million euro tech companies. He's also the first artistic director of a concert house who got his startup to Silicon Valley, and now he's an executive coach with a focus on innovation and leadership. And we will talk about how leadership will look like in the future and many more aspects. So I would say tune in tomorrow. And I would also like to recommend you our other formats today. At 11, you can watch our publisher Heidi Eichinger. She will talk to Claudia Oecking, who is leading Philip Morris International in Germany. And at 4 p.m., you can watch my colleague Chloe Lau. She will talk to Daria Zaharova. She's a German venture capitalist, and they will talk about the world of venture capital. And at 5:30, you could watch my colleague and the editor-in-chief, Klaus Fiala, and he will meet the former Nestle CEO, Peter Brabegle-Martin, and they will talk about the current crisis and how the common economy in future will look like. So I think there are a lot of different and interesting formats. And for now, thanks again, Sabinna, for joining us today and for taking the time. And I hope you all a nice day and see you soon tomorrow at 9:30. Tune in.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.